is be true to what you said on paper.
I wish that I could freely dream and be judged from within, haunted by a power that cannot see past my skin. My views are viewed as ignorant, my truth always denied. My history is shrouded in a spider web of lies. Isn't this America? Or is this America?
Is this America or lie? Good morning. Welcome back to At the Round Table with me. I'm your host, Larry Ellison. In studio this morning with my brother, Pastor Hobbs, engineer, director, one of the sharpest dressers I know. Tell you, man, James Brown, good thing he ain't around. He'd be in trouble standing next to Pastor Hobbs. And James Brown was one of the sharpest. We want to thank our sponsor, Guarantee Rate Mortgage. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Holbrook a call at area code 781-342-0252. Guarantee Mortgage is located at 75 State Street in downtown Boston, Mass. Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectations. Like I said again, folks, Dr. Bradley is on a well-deserved vacation. You know, he's out there again working on his tan. You know, he said he has a natural one, but the little sun is good for you. And I tell you, the brother works hard, so it's glad to see that he's enjoying a little time. In fact, with his lovely wife, Erica, who's now retired from the Boston Police Department for her service over the years, got out in time. They're out enjoying their time away. So if you want to give us a call here, the calling number here is 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685 is the calling number. Said you're listening to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. On the line is our regular guest. I'm proud to call him my brother. Now we've elevated from friends. Dave Serles, who is a pastor, but a community activist, someone who folks you've heard on the broadcast. So I'm just reintroducing him to some and introducing to others. Dave Serles, who has really sparked in him his call to service is really, and this is why I really truly enjoy working with people like himself, who actually I know their commitment is not about publicizing themselves, it's not about making themselves part of the discussion. It is about trying to get things done. And sadly, he is seeing the same pushback that those us who are like-minded have been trying to just get changes that benefit and help those who are in need. And you're finding that there's really not a need. Folks say they want things changed or want to do things differently. I think they call it insanity, doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So he has become a regular on the broadcast here. We're happy to have him back to give us an update. SOS, which is Save Our Schools. And I was just saying offline and online to some folks that they may have to change it from Save Our Schools to Save Our City, because what's happening in the schools is now being exhibited. We're seeing it all year long. Now we're seeing it in the communities. We're seeing it with young people in public arenas where this violence that they've been exhibiting on each other's and others, staff and the public in the schools, is now also been going on outside. But because the schools are closed, but actually the first day of school was not that great for summer school, we saw the violence tick up again. In fact, this past week, in which a parent was arrested because she alleged her child was assaulted and no one was doing anything. So it continues. But without further ado, I want to say good morning and welcome back to my brother, Dave.
Hey,
how are you, sir?
Good morning, and thanks for the invite and opportunity to be on the broadcast.
Yes, sir.
It's always good.
Yeah. So, Dave, quickly, just for, like I said, there are new listeners all the time. If you could explain to folks a little bit about what SOS and how it came about.
Sure. So 2021, during the entire fall season, as I was participating in as a member of the group that meets at the Ella Baker House, addressing violence reduction strategies across the city, we heard week after week some very serious school safety issues. School safety issues in the schools, guns in schools, serious assaults, bullying, and as you mentioned in your intro, the kind of activity that we see in schools when school dismiss would be dismissed would spill out into subway stations and all kinds of mayhem that was going on. And it was just alarming and heartbreaking. Like, here we are, a world-class city, and we have a public school system that this is the level of safety that we have for our students. It was just alarming. So week after week hearing that, in January 2022, a small group of us said we need to do something, and we formed what we called Boston SOS, which stands for Safety of Our Schools, in order to begin to draw attention to what we said was not just an isolated incident in a school over here or a school over there in the Boston public system, but the entire system. There was a school safety crisis. We were hearing stories in the media of an incident in one place, and then we would, a few weeks or a week later, hear an incident in another school. And we began to realize that people were seeing these isolated and disconnected. And people aren't following the media in every venue, so they may hear one incident and think, oh, okay, that happened, that was serious and bad, a loaded gun in a school at the Excel Academy in East Boston, and so on. And maybe that's resolved because we didn't hear another one. We wanted to make the point that this was a system-wide concern and demanded a system-wide adjustment to the school safety policies and strategy. So that's what we began to do, was call on the city and the school department to and the residents to recognize this is a school safety crisis throughout the entire system.
Right.
And as we began to make that known and try to elevate that, people began to ask us, well, what do you think should be done? And our first response was, hey, look, we just want the school, these are the professionals. We want to raise the alarm that something new needs to be done, because obviously what's working or what's in place isn't working.
Right.
And again, they repeatedly would ask, what do you think needs to be done? So we spent 2 months with our team, and we had a retired principal. We had people who had experience in school safety, working in schools, people in the community. We spent 2 months coming up with a school safety strategy that we put on our website that's available as a way to offer some input. We've always said we're not just standing on the other side of the wall shouting over, say, hey, there's a problem over there, you guys do something. We want to say, yes, there's a problem. We need to identify that. We need to speak the truth in love. But at the same time, we said, wait, we're willing to be part of the solution.
Right. You offered to roll up your sleeves.
Oh, ready to go. We're ready to do whatever. And we've got, we've got, because of the relationships that we have, we're networked pretty deeply now throughout the city. And so, that it's possible to connect a number of good people who are doing good work with young people and with children across the city to engage this issue in a way that we could, I think, make a huge difference.
Right. So to that point, Dave, how has that been received? Because let me just set the table for folks. This isn't something you woke up and said, hey, you know what, I just want to get, poke my nose into something. You have children in the school system. You live on the other side of the tunnel. So a lot of the issues that you're dealing with, yes, they impact you, but not as great as the folks that I see you advocating for. You come every Wednesday to the Violence Reduction Task Force meeting, which on your own time, your own expense, to do this because you care, right? Because you want to make a difference. Absolutely. What is, and you looked at all of these same issues that elected officials and people who get paid to deal with these matters are not dealing with it in an honest and fair way, right? Who claim they have solutions for these problems, but yet we've yet to see them materialize. What has been the response from our elected officials and those who are appointed in positions, because, like, i.e. the superintendent of schools and folks like that, into bringing you in to have a conversation, a real honest conversation? Because never have I seen you trying to lay blame on them for these problems. You're saying, look, it is a problem, just as we have been saying, who deal with it every day. What's the response? Because it wasn't what you were doing or any of us that the reason why the state is saying that, we're still in jeopardy of taking over the school system in Boston because it's not performing. It wasn't anything that you or I were doing that had them to shut down the K-8 mission school because of inappropriate sexual behavior. And to your point with the guns, in one school, there were 2 guns found in the same school in Charleston, the same day. So these weapons, this violence is not being inflicted on folks by those of us who are trying to help. But there seems to be a level of, we don't want to deal with the problem, and that's how it will go away. Am I overemphasizing this?
No, there's no, there. Yeah, so there's a number of things that seem to be at play. One is kind of a philosophical, theoretical idea about addressing safety concerns. So there was the police reform bill back in 2020, and a lot of concern about police overreach into communities and so on, right?
Right.
And the Boston Public Schools said at that, and we need to be clear about this. There's a lot of confusion, and the politicians use that confusion to their advantage.
Thank you.
So the reform,
I just want to jump in for 1 second, because you're right. To that point, I just want to extract a little bit more from that, because I found that people are using it as cover to do nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Exactly. Well,
absolutely.
We can't do anything because of reforms. Wait a minute. So the behavior, you're saying you're going to allow it to continue because this gives you cover because now there have been reforms about it. Didn't say that you couldn't address the behavior. It just says we're not going to criminalize behavior, and I'm okay with that.
Right. And in addition, that was the cover under which school police was removed from the Boston Public Schools, saying, well, the school reform, while they might, the wording is very subtle. They sort of suggest the reform demanded it, and it didn't. It did
not, right?
Major school systems in Massachusetts still have school police like
all
Brockton.
Except Boston, right?
So it was specifically not a result of the police reform, but a decision of the political leadership to do that, and they need to own that. That wasn't legislated. That was internal City of Boston decision. And so again, they need to own that.
Right.
And it's interesting. It's interesting, Larry, that that's one of our we have a 3-pronged proposal. One includes bringing school police back into school just as it was before. And there's a lot of confusion about school police even there.
Yes.
Because I was at a city council hearing, and we were advocating for our proposal and a better school safety plan.
Right.
And there were advocates, quote, from the community standing up and testifying after I spoke and some other folks spoke, saying we can't have armed police back in schools, to which I immediately realized in my head, they don't know what they're talking about.
Right, and so let me
because there was never armed police in school. The school police...
Right, and let me just
go ahead.
No, I apologize for interrupting you. So let me break that down to folks, because that's an area where I am personally involved. Right, I work in the school for the Boston Police Department. I am an employee of the Boston Police Department, City of Boston. I do not work for BPS, Boston Public Schools. The school police, in the way it was structured initially, they had police powers. They were in uniforms that said school police. They were employees of the Boston Public Schools. They worked and reported to them. They had police powers that were issued by the Boston Police Department. They were special police officers with limited powers. They were never armed. They didn't even carry mace. They didn't have batons. They were unarmed as they had. It's ironic because, to your point, Dave, they had exactly what they wanted and claimed that they had something different. Boston Police, my unit, the school police unit, right? We are armed. We are police officers. We do not have a presence in any school other than our office being inside an administrative building of BPS, right? We don't have any involvement. Kids are nowhere near us. We don't enter any entrances or exit from anywhere where kids can see us. Right. So this whole myth, exactly as you said, that armed police officers in the school, because when there are calls for service to the schools of a nature that needs a police response, regardless to whether they're from my unit or from patrol, you are going to get a police officer to deal with the problem, right? So this whole narrative, the false narrative that you had armed police officers walking up and down the hallways as this was some prison, that has not been true from day one. They've had what they wanted. What they now have is disorder. I'm sorry.
It's certainly that. So that language it's very important for people to understand that, and it gets confusing because when people use the language school police, they don't recognize there's two distinct school police units, or there were two distinct police units, and you mentioned it very well. So Boston Police Department has a school unit separate from the Boston Public School police unit.
Yeah.
And there were huge distinctions in how they function. Carrying weapons and so on. So I think that's very important for people to realize. Very important.
Yes. And just a little bit on that, is that if you just didn't call the school police, our unit school police, right, the issues that officers are responding, regardless to if you disbanded the unit and said, okay, we're no longer going to have a school police unit, because of the nature of the issues that are in the schools, we would still be responding, just taking resources. That it's actually better because, Dave, your relationship, you and I's relationship is built on me being consistently at these meetings, reporting out and knowing that you would not get from the patrol officer who goes to a call, writes a report. In the relationships that are being built, were being built prior to these barriers put in place with staff and students, right? So there's really a dysfunction and a discredit to the students and the staff by eliminating something that was working with this false narrative that we were the pipeline of prison, because the behavior is going to get them there quicker than anything that I'm doing.
Absolutely. So it's interesting, Larry, that I don't know if your listeners are aware, and maybe not, because a lot of newspapers are now subscription only, and so you can't even read the online version. But the Wall Street Journal did a piece 2 weeks ago, I think, talking about major school districts across the country who had made the decision to remove police from school, who are now actively either bringing them back or seriously considering bringing them back. And one school district was Denver, Colorado, where they had the level of school violence where they actually had not just guns being brought into school, but shootings in schools. The superintendent, apart from a decision of the school committee, decided to bring police officers back in. He said, we have to have this level of safety. I don't care what you say. I'm the superintendent. And so he made a very courageous decision, I think, from what I'm reading in the story, to do that. And I think that's an indication of what needs to happen here in Boston.
Well, Dave, we've talked about that, right? And we talked about the hypocrisy, right? Of, you're saying that the folks who are on the front line, the teachers, the staff, the students, right, that they should have less protection than our elected officials at City Hall, right? Or if you go to the Fleet Center, right, the TD Garden, or any place where the public, any federal building, if you go to the airport, you have to go through some type of screening, right? Whether it's a metal detector or wanding, something. You just don't get to access where you have crowds like that without any scrutiny, right? And they're saying, oh, this is traumatic to these kids. I think it's more traumatic when they see one of their teachers, as we saw up at Tech Boston, and one of their fellow students shot than going through a metal detector that is very little. It's the least intrusive right now of anything that they're going through. So this false narrative, I guess, then why do we have these in public buildings, right? Why is there a metal detector in security and armed police officers patrolling City Hall, right? Which we don't have in the schools, where there are more adults there than I don't think there are any children that work at City Hall, right? So why are they more protected than our valued young people and the staff that are there on the front lines of these schools?
Yeah, and I know that's an interesting point, and it confounds me how people can continue to say, given all the locations, and you mentioned a number of them, where we already have existing protocols of metal detectors that people don't even think about when they go into those venues. They readily do it. And I think gladly, because you know you're going in, and there's less likely there's going to be somebody toting a weapon in there, and I'm kind of glad about that. And believe me, I wouldn't fly on an airplane. You couldn't pay me enough to get on an airplane if there wasn't metal detectors.
That's right.
People, are you kidding me? So we accept it in those locations, but somehow in people's heads, they somehow then will twirl and say, well, we can't put them in schools because we'll be criminalizing our children. Right. And I say, wait a minute. Do you feel criminalized for 1 second when you... I had a conversation with a young woman recently. Do you feel criminalized when you go through the metal detector at City Hall and she looked at me like with a blank stare, like...
Right.
I knew the answer.
Right.
No, you don't.
Exactly.
You don't think that these people think you're a criminal.
Dave.
You realize we need this because of the high level of publicity and power of our elected officials. We want them to be safe in a world where this stuff could happen. Right. So I want the metal detector in City Hall, but somehow that you can twirl and say then and then they say, well, you need to talk with the kids. And what I say is, look, the young people are repeating back what the adults are saying.
Well, absolutely.
We can teach our young people. We can teach our young people what's right.
Yeah.
The analogy I use, when I was growing up, Larry, there were no seat belts.
Right.
Well, there may have been a seat belt in the car, but my parents never used one.
Right, and
I never sat in a seat belt.
Right.
I was bouncing around the back seat like
like
my mom would put her arm out.
Style, right? I'm sorry.
Oh, my mom would she would break and put her arm up between the bucket seats to quote prevent her child from flying through the window. Right. It was crazy.
Right.
But now you, me, I don't. For a second, think about strapping on the the seatbelt, and then if there's a kid in there, no, honey, you need to wear the seatbelt. Well, mommy, daddy, it's too confining. I want to bounce around.
Right.
No, it's gonna protect you or save your life. And so we've normalized that important safety equipment. We don't even think about it. And so I think the same thing can happen. We can educate our young people. This is and they won't think about it. It won't be an issue. And furthermore, what I would say to people, there's a couple of diagnostic questions. Number one,
but let me just
diagnostic question.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'd say let me just because I just want to point out a couple other things and don't lose your train of thought when you're talking about the security, right? Because the last few years, I have younger children and we've been traveling and we went to Legoland. We had to go through metal detectors, all of us, right?
Hello?
We went to Disney and Mickey Mouse is not trying to keep people from coming in to traumatize kids, right? We went to we had to go through metal detectors, and I noticed that. These are places that in the past you didn't have to, but things have changed. The world has changed. So these are places where it is designed for children, for their parents to bring them, but it is designed for children. Do you think they would have these things in place if it was going to traumatize their kids?
Right. And where are the protests that we're criminalizing our children at Disney? No, parents are gladly paying whatever they're paying to get their kid in there.
Exactly.
Gladly. Without batting an eye, right?
Exactly.
So, that's a great illustration.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this equipment is not rare and unusual. It's normal now. Mm-hmm. And we need to normalize it in the minds of our young people, and particularly when it comes to school safety. The point I was going to make was, the diagnostic question is, number one, is it okay for young people of any age to bring a gun into a school?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody needs to answer that.
Right.
If it's okay, then our conversation's over. I don't know what to do with you in this conversation. But if it's no, then the second question is, how are you going to ensure that a young person doesn't bring a gun?
Right.
And so one response to the school safety issues, we need more social workers and mental health professionals to address the mental health issues.
We've done that. How's that working?
Well, exactly. Well, and I'm not. We're in favor for it.
Exactly.
And that's part of our proposal.
Right.
But how does that working in terms of
to that point, Dave? Let me just let me break that down a little bit for folks to understand, right? Because we're in total agreement. Matter of fact, Rose Pierre, who attends those meetings, is here with, and I want to get him the way. And so, for Rose, feel free to jump in there. Dave Serles, who you know from the Baker House meetings, right? So. To that point, I've got numerous calls. Like I said, for full disclosure, I work in the schools for the Boston Police Department. There are calls to our office. Oh, we've got a 6 or 7 year old out of control. And my response back to them is, okay, that sounds like a medical issue, not a criminal issue. This is the police department. How can I help you? And then, we have a 6-year-old out of control. Again, my response is, okay, that sounds like a medical. You need an ambulance. No, we want the police to come. And I say to them, how many adults do you have in that building? What do you mean? I said, how many adults are there? Probably close to 40, 50 or more, right, in the building. Another adult coming over armed with a weapon to deal with a 6 or 7 year old out of control is not the appropriate response. We're going to pass on this, right? This is what you guys are saying. We have social workers, we have a best team, right? We have people who we agree are better suited to deal with this problem than an armed Boston police officer. We are in agreement with you on that. But yet, by default, you keep calling us. And what's the optics look like when I go over there and the 6 or 7 year old is kicking me and I have to defend myself? It doesn't look good. So you claim this is what you want. Now you have it. And the people who actually decided it for you are not the ones who are on the receiving end of the kicks, right? They're making these decisions from the 5th floor someplace, right? And they don't have to deal with the reality of it. And this is what we're trying to explain to them, Dave. So your point is well taken, that we're not against, and we don't feel threatened by having these extra resources or people who are better trained, who have gone to school. I did not go to the police academy or the college to be a social worker, but I know a lot of the work that I do is attached to that. But if there is someone who is better, I have a problem taking a step back and having them deal with this individual because they're better suited to deal with that. So
and that's indicative of what we're saying. If the school system can't deal with a 6-year-old child who's having behavioral issues in the school, we obviously don't have good safety protocols in place in response to deal with that. A 6-year-old should not be raising havoc where the adults are saying, we don't know what to do.
Dave, have you
You're
ever
an
had a 6-year-old in your
You're
home?
professionals. You ought to have a strategy. There ought to be a protocol in place in school to deal with the 6-year-old with the behavior problem.
Are you a parent? Are you a parent?
I'm a parent.
I know you are. I'm just asking for artists, right? Have you had a 6-year-old in your home?
Oh my!
Have you had to have call the police for it?
Not to date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's grow up and let's be and that's part of the problem. People are afraid to be adults.
Right.
We defer to young people. We need to ask the young people. No, at some point, the young people and the children know that if the adults aren't running the show, it's not safe place.
Well, Dave, to your point there, you are so right. To your point there, we've changed the laws because we've said that the young people's minds are not developed, they're not responsible enough to make the decisions, right? And yet we're by default saying, well, how do you want to handle this young person, right? We're saying that they're not capable, but now we're deferring to them and saying, how do you want to be treated? You're out of control.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. We need the adults running the program here. Let me bring up another thing, and this is part of our ongoing strategy in terms of the school issues, and all of this is interconnected. The school budget for 23-24 is $1.4 billion. I want people who are listening to get that in their head. $1.4 billion. Now, $1 billion, we hear that all the time. I hear it all the time. And we even hear the word trillion. Mm-hmm. But I want people to get clear how much $1 billion is. If you started counting numerically 1, 2, 3, 4, and you could count a number every second, and you started counting right now, you would reach 1 billion in 32 years.
Wow.
I want you to get that in your head. That's $1 billion. That's a lot of money. 1.4 billion. It's about 1/3 of the total. Get this, folks. 1/3 of the total city budget. Right. That's a substantial percentage.
Right.
We ought to be holding to account every official in the school system at the highest city levels for that budget. This ought to be a top priority campaign conversation with anybody running for city council, because we have city council election coming. If somebody's not talking about school, their campaign is irrelevant.
Exactly,
because we're talking 1/3.
Right.
Every third dollar that's spent in the city of Boston is going to the school. Right. That's, to me, so astounding.
And to that point, Dave, it increased by $268 million for this physical calendar year, right? So what they were getting was not enough. And the thing that people don't pay enough attention to is that the population in the Boston Public Schools has decreased dramatically. And I'll give you an example. When I started in that unit as a police officer working there over 15 years ago, there were around 75,000 students in the BPS system, right? We're down now to about 46,000, depending on who you ask, close to 46, 47,000. So you have a decrease in the number of students there. You have a decrease in the learning that's taking place. You have an increase in the violence, but yet we continue to fund a system that doesn't work. If this was a private entity, right? And the taxpayers were funding a nonprofit, right? To in this manner, folks would be appalled that their tax dollars were going in this way. It's just appalled. I know, Rhodes, you want to weigh in? I know Dave was saying.
No, I definitely agree with everything that you guys are saying. And you know the old saying, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, or if it, it doesn't need fixing. And I grew up and I went to the Boston public school system when they actually had police officers in the school system. We knew them by name. When they're saying, we want to increase community policing, like, that's a great way to get community policing, by having the police officers in the in the school systems interacting with students and actually building relationships.
And you brought a great point. And then, Dave, I want to grab these calls coming in. Is that outside of the school, they're encouraging us to engage these kids and build up, community. We have a community engagement bureau, right? Which my unit is part of, right? So you're right. You're saying that in the school they're off limits, but these are where the problems are. Yeah. And when they get out, you want us to engage them. How about we engage them right, and try to correct the behavior so they can actually learn?
Absolutely, because the thing,
excellent point.
Like a lot of times when the teachers couldn't reach the students by having the police officer there, they could reach them. Like, they hooked us up with like summer jobs. Well, some
of our most successful programs was the DARE program, things of that nature, right, where we would bring in and talk about these things. We don't get to engage them in that way anymore. Say no to drugs. I mean, these were big campaigns. The resource officers were the ones, and there was a connection. And then when you saw them outside, they saw you as someone. And I remember having to address a parent one time where I was doing a detail. This is going back when I did them. And her child was acting up. And she brings him over to me. So, see, the officer is going to arrest you. I said, ma'am, don't paint me as the boogeyman. I said, because if your child is lost or something in there, and you've painted me as someone that they shouldn't go to, they may go to some stranger who may cause them harm because you tell them I'm someone that they should fear. And not thinking, so I had to let her know this is not appropriate to paint me as someone because I have this authority. I'm not going to, and I told the child, no, Mommy's got it wrong. I am not going to arrest you. I'm not someone, and shake their hand, But her mindset was, this is someone who I can't control, or I can't act as a parent. I'm going to, by default, put that on. No, you're not passing that on to me. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Dave, let's take this call for you. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Good morning.
You wanted to weigh in? No.
Hello?
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question goes, why is it the mayor, the superintendent, and all 13 city councilors are trying to not descale the situation, but trying to make it easy for these kids to really learn, to have a real education, so the parents can feel at ease that their tax dollars is going to real good and not just throwing good money over bad money,
Well, Dave, I'll let you take first shot at that because we've been asking this for quite some time. The mission there is to cut funding from law enforcement, right? And we're seeing, police officers, the lack of interest in the job, right? Because I don't think you're going to attract the best and the brightest by saying, we're going to remove things from you. We're going to make it more difficult for you to do the job. So, that's a good advertising slogan. That's a good recruitment slogan, right? And why we're seeing so few people, even on EMS, are looking, and officers are working long hours, right? So you're taking money and you're reallocating it elsewhere, right? And not being honest in a lot of instances with the public, because we don't work for free. I don't work for free. If I have to work overtime, and in most instances what people aren't seeing when they look at these salaries, it doesn't tell you how much of this overtime is ordered, where you have officers that have been working triple shifts, which is not safe, which is not healthy for the officers or the public, right? We are in a crisis mode when it comes to public safety, but people are not treating it that way until they dial 911 and they're getting a busy signal, right? So the city councils are saying, we're going to reallocate this money to these programs. And then they don't evaluate whether or not any of those programs are working. It's just throw money at this because we have almost a $4 billion budget, right? That we're throwing money at a problem without assessing whether or not it's working. And on top of that, where I say they're not being honest with the public, is that you're not spending any less. Oh, we're going to cut the police overtime budget, right? Which is a wink and a nod, because if you still have to have as many officers working on overtime, you are still spending that overtime budget on top of what you're spending on something that you're not even evaluating whether or not it's being effective. It just boggles the mind. So, Dave, go ahead and weigh in.
No, it's a great question. And let me ask: is the caller a parent himself?
Yes, I am.
You're a parent. You're the precise constituents that we're trying to advocate for and make your voice heard. Mm-hmm. Your question is a brilliant one and a worthy one. And to be honest, I don't think we've heard a good answer. Mm-hmm. We do have some city councilors who are taking strong positions around school safety, and they need to be applauded and supported.
And not called racist for calling out a system that is almost 90% people of color and saying that impacts them, that we want them to have a safe environment, does not make you a racist.
Quite the contrary. Right? If the majority of students in BPS, and by the way, the statistics are there's only 15% white population in BPS. I want you to get that. 15%.
And when you break that down to where they are, right, they're in the exam.
If the schools are failing, they're largely failing the black and Latino communities. Right. That's who they're failing. So if we're advocating, and school safety has to be at the foundation. Mm-hmm. I mean, Larry mentioned getting a call at the police department to come and tend to a 6-year-old who's acting up. Right. If the school can't deal with a 6-year-old, that child is disrupting the education for every other 6-year-old in that class. Let me tell you, if there's one kid acting up in a class severely, nobody's learning in that class. There has to be order, loving discipline, boundaries. There has to be consequences for behavior, and kids learn in that environment how to behave, how to act, and then if kids aren't able to behave and act, there needs to be a system out of which we then address whatever underlying issues may be challenging that child to behave in such a way. But we can't excuse it or wink and nod or allow it. We can't allow that one student to just act up in a class because, we don't want whatever. We need to have order and discipline. And in that environment, children can learn and thrive. So, they thrive, so they feel safe. So I think school safety is a foundational issue, and that's why we keep calling for it and keep addressing it. And so, parents, you have the option this election year to make schools a number one political issue. Right. And if people who are running for elected office aren't talking about schools, they're irrelevant in the reality that you live in, sir. As a parent, so I would say we need to have people ready to vote this elected season and make schools a number one priority. And school safety is at the foundation, but then also the learning aspect. We need to hold our school system to account for helping our children to really learn.
Right. And to that point, Dave, Rose had a question he's going to throw out there, but you're right. Sure. Even if you don't have children in the school, as a taxpayer, because if you buy anything, if you're paying rent, that is going towards the property taxes for the landlord to pay taxes. You should be alarmed and concerned and saying, what am I getting for this? Because it keeps increasing. Every time there's an increase in the amount of money they're asking, I tell people, tell me one product the government makes. They make nothing. So the only way they extract money is from us, right? And we don't hold people accountable. As someone said to me a while ago, if you had to write a check voluntarily every week to pay your taxes, most people would not pay it. They would be outraged. They'd look at it differently. But because they get it before you know it, people don't see it the same. But it is your money. It is your money. And if it's not being spent efficiently, why are we accepting this from them? And I know Rhodes had a question he was asking.
Yeah, like what levels of discipline do they have? Like, can they suspend or can they put the kid in detention? Like, what can they do with the child these days?
Well, Dave, I tell you, it is more difficult now for them to suspend kids as they used to. And I get it. In some ways, it was just being overused, but there are situations where it is needed, because by the time they do, the behavior has become so dramatic and so out of control that they are giving them longer suspensions for behavior that hasn't been curtailed early enough to
I'm not actually working in a school, so I don't know all the inner workings of how discipline functions. But there seems to be an inconsistency across the city in terms of how discipline gets applied.
Yeah. Yes.
And if again, it's not a good thing if a school is calling the local police to come and intervene when a 6-year-old is acting up. I just can't get my head out of that situation. That is indicative not of. I mean, the child has some stuff going on, but it's indicative of a failed safety plan and protocol to deal with those behaviors in an appropriate way. I would say suspension needs to be rare. We need to. The kids need to be engaged within the school system. There need to be protocols that discipline them within the system. There may be levels of involvement and interaction. It may be that the child is not in the right school placement for their situation.
Are the parents involved? Are the parents being held responsible one way or another? With a
lot of parents feel like once they've got the child out the door, their job is done. Their job is done.
Well, that begs the other issue. Right. You know, how do we hold? How do we either hold or help parents be better involved? And enable them to be better involved. They may be at their wits' end. Right. I'm a single mom. I have 3 kids. I do my best to get everybody out the door and on to school. Right. And you know, how do we provide? And this is where the larger community engagement needs to happen, and schools need to be open to engaging, not just within the school environment, yes, absolutely, but also interacting with local community services that could engage these families. And I think that's the issue that comes up. Is it's not just the child. Often it's the family system.
Because as they say,
we need to engage the family system and help that get
that child. Yeah. So
it does. But the problem is that they feel like the schools. A lot of parents don't have the education. I get it. If you can't help your child, but there are services out there. But what you can, you don't need to have someone else tell you what is inappropriate behavior. I think most people know what that is, and a lot of times we ignore it, or we'll give our child a device to distract them from it, right? And that becomes a babysitter when the school is out of session, right? Because now for the summer, we're even seeing like a lot of camps they're not full, and these are camps that offer services for free or at such a discount rate. Camp Harborview is one of the places the most sought. When one of the folks would tell me we still have openings. This is a camp where they take the kids over to the island. It's $5 for the whole summer. I mean, and what they do over there, because we used to go over and engage with them. We haven't done it in a while because of all of this, but this is something that's beneficial and cost effective, right? $5. And some parents won't even pay the $5 to get their child registered, right? And they waive it if you can't pay the $5. But I say that this is something that all you have to do is sign your child up, basically.
But again, it's a communication with the city, because a lot of parents, I'm sure, don't even know that the program exists.
But they know, and this is where if right now, if I said MAMLEO is giving away 10,000 turkeys in the next hour.
But it's the same group of parents are going to show up. The ones that don't hear about it.
But not only that, this would be on all kinds of social media. And hey, you better get down there before. And they'd have everyone. The word would get out quickly. Yeah. I would have they wouldn't even be able to thaw by the time we got out there, right? So Dave should be overwhelmed with turning down offers for help instead of trying to recruit parents who are impacted by this, who are waiting for someone else to do what they need to. The most valuable investment as a parent, my wife and I know, one is our relationship, making sure that it's solid, that we continue to show and provide a loving and nurturing. Our children, not depending on someone else, other than if we want to go out together, that person is going to be charged with watching them, babysitting them. Mm-hmm. Like, I get offended sometimes. Oh, you babysitting?
That's your kids.
I don't have a daycare. These are my children. I'm spending time with my kids. Yeah. But because their mindset is that when the father is there, that it's the babysitting duty. You're like, no, I'm their dad. Yeah. We're hanging out. Yeah. We're doing dad and daughter thing. We're giving mom a little break because she has them the bulk of the time because I'm working. That's the arrangement that we have, and it works for us. But Cliff has just joined us. We want to get him away. He's been taking this all in. Cliff, what's your response to all that?
I'm just sitting here just taking it all in, you know what I'm
saying? Taking it all. He's gonna wait till the 9 o'clock hour to really unload. But Dave, I don't know why you don't have an army of parents that their children are impacted, and that's how they get away with this, because there's a lack of parental involvement, because parents who can have navigated their children out of this system, and some folks used to see the charter schools as an alternative, and I can tell folks now they're no better. They're no better now. They used to be, because they could pick the cream of the crop, and if they weren't working out at some point, they could send them back to BPS, and they get to keep the money.
Yes.
Even though now the parents who have been able to get their kids in the Metco system or private schools, but now the charter schools, we're getting the same amount of calls. We're getting the same amount of problems there. Again, because they're some quasi-private, they try to keep it under wraps. And the same thing with BPS. Everything is a hot until it blows up. The fact that you have to shut down a K through 8 school because inappropriate sexual behavior, the whole school, not a classroom, the whole school.
And that's not even being addressed.
Right. And here's the other thing people aren't paying attention to. As of this school calendar year, there are no more middle schools. So schools are being it's only K. It's K through 8 and then 8 to 12. There are no longer middle schools, so you have less schools open. We're spending more money. The results are abysmal. Dave, do you have any updates? Because what I've seen is troubling as far as the state and their receivership approach. They're saying that there's really been no improvement. So do you think it's the state is waiting too long to intervene in this problem? Because it only seems to be getting worse.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of all that conversation, and whether it would be, when we're talking about government oversight, do we think the state will be better at it, and maybe not, but at the same time, if it's, if the local entity is perpetuating failure again and again.
But I think the state.
I don't know what the best solution. I mean, and this begs the issue, because this is what parents run up against, Larry, is absolute frustration.
Right.
Absolute frustration. I talk with parents, and they're at their wits' end. I've tried to address the issues with the school, and they. And nothing gets done.
But to that point, and I thought to interrupt you. You remember recently, the Boston Public School System, they requisited a report and they brought in professionals. I even interviewed with them, with the police commissioner and others, and some of the safety services, the former school police, and they sent back recommendations. For the safety in the building. Do you remember seeing that report or hearing about that report?
Absolutely.
And none of it has been implemented. It's like they tell you what's wrong. You have an independent. This is not the Boston Police Department telling you again.
Right.
This is not Dave Surlis telling you again, and people at the safety meeting, that there is a problem in the school, because you and Rhodes are there in these meetings every Wednesday for the most part, and we're hearing the driving force that 90+% of the problems that we're talking about are related to young people, and these are school-age kids. So this report that they sought and they've implemented none of it. The first recommendation was that they bring back some form of police in the school.
They have their own police department. The school needs to have their own police department. Hello, that's what we did have, and why don't we have it? Right, and why is there continued resistance?
Right.
Well, and again, and a great point. So that raises another alarm. Why are they ignoring the very people they brought in to bring a good assessment?
That they paid well to,
and just completely ignored.
Because it didn't fit their narrative. This is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
And there's no push from folks, and the few on the council that looked at it and said, okay.
Anybody on the council have kids in the school?
I'm not sure.
There are a few.
Yeah, Laura does.
There are a few.
Oh, well, great example.
The mayor has children in the Boston public school system.
Well, I'm sure that they're not in the regular school.
Not.
Okay.
No, they're not.
And then,
they are, by and large, the people opposed to.
But the people that are opposed
common
to,
sense,
did any of them go to the Boston public school system? Did any of the city councilors? Did any of them?
See, what happened, in my opinion, was the George Floyd matter. Folks took advantage, and they created a problem that didn't exist. Not to the level where you needed these overhauls that were really overreaching and really taking things that work. Like, remember we had Operation Homefront, Dave. I know you participated in that.
Absolutely.
These are things where we were able to go out with clergy and visit homes.
Absolutely.
All these things got shut down, and they're blaming a lot of this had nothing to do with COVID. This was there. Yeah, there was some issues with one member of the clergy, but that problem could have been fixed, and we could have moved on. Every time they see an opportunity. Because, in my opinion, their thing was, okay, if the police are not involved and if our people are not writing reports, then we can say the problem doesn't exist, that it's not being documented, right? So by removing their school police, who had police powers to write police reports, and they still could write them even as civilians, they don't. Now they're just employees of Boston Public Schools. They don't have to report to us and cooperate with us.
And then so therefore the reports don't come to light. They can have a false narrative about
right. But it's actually put more work on us, because what happens now is that the Boston police are writing these reports. We're inundated. We have less people in our unit, and now they're going to the police station frustrated because they feel like these people are just ignoring the problem. Want to bring in this caller, Dave? You got to take another call. Good morning, caller. Sure. Welcome to the roundtable. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, Larry. I think we have a bad connection here. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
We can hear you clearly. I don't know if you can hear us. All right, we'll try and clear that. Eric's going to try to clear up that line. Yeah, so Dave, again, it's like we unless parents get engaged, unless voters get engaged and demand more for that $1.4 billion that we're spending, an increase every year. They're asking for more, and we're getting less.
It's It gets that. So there's a couple of things. One is we continue to hear, well, the reason we have problems in public education is because we need more money. But I would give this illustration. If I'm on the road driving down the highway in the wrong direction, even if I need to pull over and get gas and fill it up again and head in the wrong direction, that's not helping me.
Right.
We've got to be headed in the right direction, and we're not.
No.
And some of that comes back to political leadership.
Right.
At the highest levels, we have to address this with the mayor. I think that she needs to be a part of this and held to account for this.
Well, before we grab this,
it's under her watch as mayor that this is happening. And unless we have a change in a vision for schools, we're going to be perpetuating this same model.
Exactly.
And so we need to, I think, be politically involved. I would encourage parents, and if you want to connect with us at Boston SOS, you can go to our website, bostonsos.com, and there's a way for you to engage and sign up and be aware of, and we can link you in our email list to what we're doing.
Right. Dave, can I squeeze this? Can I squeeze this call in?
To make this a political issue this year and to send a signal.
Right.
That schools need to be a number one issue.
Right.
And if you're running for office for city council and it's not, school safety needs your number one issue. And what is your policies? We need to know.
Right.
You know, parents came out recently in a poll, said 75% of Boston Public School parents said, we want metal detectors in school police.
Right.
That's what parents are saying.
Right.
If the politicians aren't listening, vote them out.
Right.
They work for you.
Right.
They work for you.
Right.
You're paying their salary.
Exactly.
So our parents, we need to be. You need to be enrolled to vote. If you're not, get enrolled to vote and get out there and listen to these candidates.
Right.
That's some of our work we're going to do is make known what the particular positions of city councilors going forward and so on. So,
Dave, can you hear me?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay, we're at the top of the hour. Do you have about 5 minutes on the top? Because we got some calls they want to get to you.
I can do 5 minutes on the other side.
Okay, all right. We're gonna have to take our break. And Barry, hold on. I know you had a question. Barry Lawton, actually, he's going to call back. Okay, he's running for office as well, so maybe he has some solutions to these problems.
Oh, great.
Okay, so that's why I wanted you to hear from him, Dave. We're going to take our break, and thank you for holding on. Ditko, thank you, sir, for calling in and continue to be an analyst, but we got to push this out there. So we're going to take our required break, and we'll be right back. How you been, bro? Oh, man, fighting the fight. It's not.
This is for the dreamers. They say say I am a dreamer, cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard. Hustle real hard, hustle so if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, no, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog. I wrote 300 songs in 1 year, Boogie will tell you I'm on it. I got unreleased songs for days, they don't want it. Eat any MC in the game, it ain't a challenge. If your music reflects who you are, then you's a coward. I can see through the lies, you ain't living what you spitting. If your money's so long, why your dog's in prison? Why your baby mom's stripping, why your mom's still living in that same broken home that you used to sell piffin'? You ain't gotta lie to me to sell me a track. You ain't gotta rock fake jewels or walk around strapped. I respect artists getting money, but love them for spitting crack. And the fact that one track can move a family out the trap. It's a dream for us lost souls brought up in the mix. I'm motivated by the artists coming out in my midst, and the artists that paved the way when I didn't exist. Music's a skyscraper, I'm just trying to add a couple bricks. This is for the dreamers. They say I am a dreamer, cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard. Hustle real hard, hustle so if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, no, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog. I always dreamed I'd be on